Hello and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast with myself, Craig Lewis. We have a truly cosmopolitan episode today because we have our producer, Ohm, somewhere in America, making sure that everything runs all smoothly for you all. And we have our guest, Deepak Shukla, in Italy, as well as myself in the UK. So you can't get more worldwide than that. Just a little idea of how big the Everyday Athlete podcast network is and how big we're becoming. Just a reminder that Running Tales is part of that network. We come out live initially across all social media. Perhaps you're listening to us now on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or X or whatever you call it now, and any of those socials. We then come out on a podcast on Thursday, so be sure to check that out as well. And while you're doing that, like and review it, but also check out all the other brilliant podcasts that are part of the network, because I absolutely love them. And I'm sure if you like Running Tales, that you'll like things like Joe Hardin's Beyond the Finish Line. The last episode there was an absolutely fascinating DNF roundtable where they talked about how the power of the DNF almost enables people to go on to greater success, and how it's not by any means an ending, but kind of another start in people's running journeys. We've also got the amazing Food Fight Friday at the aid station, which I always love. Jason and Adam this week were talking about whether they prefer to take a Burger King Whopper or a Calgary Stampede pancake breakfast with them as they go around their ultra. I mean, honestly, I don't know where these guys get these ideas from. I just prefer a few gummies, but there you go. Check that out. Check out what's in your earbuds. Check out the Fireside Chat and Fiery Embers. It's all brilliant. And a little exclusive for you here. If you've not been following Jason Bahamundi's LinkedIn, you may not have noticed that we are going to have three more podcasts added to the network in the new year. It's fantastically exciting. So much going on with the network. And one of the things going on is that we're going to be speaking to Deepak Shukla today, and I'm going to bring Deepak forward in a second. He's a man who wears such a huge, wide variety of hats. A British-born Indian who, as I said, living in Italy now. He's done everything from own a seven-figure business to train with Georgian special forces to winning a Muay Thai fight in Brazil, and lots and lots and lots of running, including a 100-miler and a 200-miler on the horizon. So let's bring Deepak forward, and we'll have a chat with him on today's Running Tales podcast. Hey Deep, how you doing?
Hey Craig, good. Embarrassed by that intro. Even whilst I'm a British Indian living in Italy, I don't do well with intros like that. I was like, oh, who's that? Who's that? It's like Stu. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know about that, but no, I'm good and happy to be here, and of course just excited to talk about running and kind of everything else. So thank you for having me on.
No, you're more than welcome. And my kind of first question, without embarrassing you too much further, is how on earth do you find the time to do all that stuff?
I mean, I guess saying that I've always had a lot of energy is one of those cliched answers that no one really enjoys. I think that a couple of things. I think part of it is genetics. Specifically, what I mean by that is that my family, if I look at our ancestral history, came from a hard farming background in terms of where we're from in India. So lots of farmland, lots of just dusk till dawn farming. And I see now that me being the first generation born in the UK alongside my siblings, I'm the youngest of five, I see a bit of a tenacious energy level that manifests across all of my siblings. So I do think I think that's part of, I do think it's part of that. And then I think alongside that, I think that I guess earlier you start with being busy, you either potentially go two ways. One, of course, you get overwhelmed, you burn out, and then you dial it back. Or you, to a degree, do get burnt out, but you then try and figure out how to get really on top of time management. And thankfully, I've done bits of both, but I think that I've got better at time management as time, pardon the pun, has progressed. And I think that those two things have kind of been very, very helpful outside of the perhaps more typical stuff you'd expect about, routines and routine systems and structures. Maybe it's not obvious, but yeah, those two things I think have been really, really instrumental in how I try and manage everything that I do.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I want to get into obviously the running that you've done and how you got into it in the first place. But I'm interested there, but you talk about problem solving in life with all those balls that you're juggling. How relatable is that to when you're taking on these long distances in running, like 100 miler? That is in itself a problem solving thing. So the two things seem to be
Yeah.
similar in a way.
No, absolutely. So I think that, I mean, a couple of things that have worked for me strategically. I think that knowing from the base that we all have, let's say, limited willpower in the day. So what I mean by that is that you wake up, you're feeling fresh mentally, and then you've got maybe, let's say, a good 4 to 6 hours of focus before everything becomes a bit more reactive. So knowing that, I think that structuring the most important tasks at your start of day is very important. And what's interesting is that running in and of itself, you can kind of do with your almost secondary brain on. I find that the problem, or the part that requires a lot of like mental calories, is programming your runs, prep routines, and organizing ultimately race weekends, training weekends. So I outsourced all of that. Basically, I went on to VO2, which is a running app that I found. And then I saw that there were these running coaches for like $50 to $100 a month. And I thought, let me try one. So right now I work with Alexei, who's transformed my running. He's this Ukrainian who, I've never had a phone call with him. It's just all WhatsApp. He's never even sent me a voice note, but he programs basically all my runs into VO2, which syncs with Garmin. And that changed things for me, because I just needed someone to tell me what to do and when to do it. And that ultimately has been great for me. So I look at things. So that, to be honest with you, has been a big part of my life, and that's what's really helped with running and my routines. I just look at my phone and I say, cool, today, for example, today I had to do an hour run with some elevation, as I told you just before I got onto the call. But it wasn't, I literally don't think about it. I just kind of turn up, so that's all I need to do. And that has been so helpful for me in terms of my running career, if you will.
I find that really fascinating, actually, and you know, as someone who is, say, wearing all those different hats, juggling those balls, is that something you find in when you're approaching a business as well? Because you talked about the dangers of getting overwhelmed if we do too much, kind of burning out.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
one of the ways that you avoid that by knowing when to outsource, when to get help, how to, you know, because we can't, however brilliant, we can't do it all on our own, can we?
No, I agree. I think much like, you know, you were referencing, for example, your producer, or lovely guy. If you, I think that so there's a couple of things. So I having systems in every part of your life is hugely instrumental. So that has been very, very helpful. So much like, for example, I have the running coach, I also literally have a PA, a personal assistant from Chill. She's in the Philippines, and she manages all of my Amazon orders, all of my flight bookings, and you can get people of her caliber really inexpensively. Less than, for example, you can start someone in the Philippines at $300 a month, as an example. And I guess I took to heart that whole concept of leveraging time. If you take your hour, like your time to be, even if your time's 20 quid an hour, as an example, but the amount of time that we do spend on stuff like that, I think is quite significant. So things like that in every bucket of my life has been really, really instrumental. And because of the distributed world that we live in, it's so inexpensive to do it. So I'll always go to someone to help me achieve a goal. So I'm a great believer in coaches. I'm a great believer in personal assistants. And that has really helped me, as you said, with the business. So I have a personal assistant, but then I also have an assistant for business that I would just fire all these messages to, and then they will correspond with the rest of the team. And it's similarly with running. I have Alexei, and I'll ask him questions. Between Alexei and then ChatGPT, which is my other darling, that kind of answers a lot of my questions. So that's been very helpful for me in terms of running and time management.
Yeah, but I think there are coaches out there at the moment applauding you right now, going, "Yeah, talk more about how important we are." But of course, they are vitally important. Just rewinding a little bit.
Yeah.
When did you first get into running? Were you always a runner? Was it something you did
Yeah.
growing up?
So I started running when I was 15. I think I used to go to a park called Black Park in Hillingdon, where I was born and raised. And then I would go with a mate of mine, Tom, and I think he was already running around Black Park. He'd go out with his dad would take him out and he'd do runs around it. And I just opted to join him, discovered that I had, I liked it, to be honest with you. And I was happy. It's funny. They don't believe in Christmas. And they was like, right, we're going for a run. I was like, it's Christmas Day. So we don't believe in Christmas. We think it's a load of BS. So I remember feeling so excited but they're like, we're still going to see family and stuff because we're obligated, but we think it's nonsense. You can still train on Christmas Day. So I still remember going out at like 6:30 a.m. My family just thought I was nuts because I was 16 at the time, a year after we started running. And I went out to Black Park with him, and we just always do this run around the park, which is like 3.5 kilometers. He would always beat me, like unequivocally would always beat me. So that kind of continued on and off. And then the turning point in terms of, let's say, distance running came when I went to, and you'll see a kind of thread here. I went to a self-development weekend conference, one of those things where you go in and then they upsell you at the end of the weekend, but as part of it, you get kind of a load of advice. And I think I was 2021 at that time, and I'd never been exposed to anything like that before. And it just spoke of, if there's something that you want to do or something that you got a passion for, really dive into it and do it to the utmost of your ability. And that really inspired me, because up until that point, I never run further than 8 kilometers. So then I booked a flight to Chicago on a credit card that I needed to then pay back to go. So my first ever marathon was the Chicago Marathon. So I booked the flight one way, and then I was like, Christ, no, sorry, I booked a return flight with my girlfriend at that time, and then I booked in the marathon, and then I posted it on Facebook because this was the teachings about public accountability and one-way door, do something where it's difficult for you to turn back from. So I was like, right, non-refundable flight, cool, a cheapo with transfer, so it was like a 3-day flight or whatever. But still, I was like, I've never spent that much money on a flight before. So then, as a consequence, that became the journey that began ultra running. And I have to say, the thing that changed everything, though, was literally 14 months ago, from the first time I've got a running coach. And I am really frustrated that I didn't get a running coach 10, 15 years ago, because I only am now beginning to understand that I've got even some basic level of running ability. So I spent years plateauing, DNFing, not finishing stuff, not training, but with no routine, just thinking, I feel like doing a 5-mile run today. I feel like doing a 10-mile run today.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, parts of my journey, if you will, in terms of running.
Yeah. And did that inability or not to follow a proper plan, did that sort of include neglecting all those things we're told we should do, which I definitely don't, like strength training?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
I think that when you get into spaces that are in any way extreme, I do think there's a lot of self-selection that happens. So, for example, what I mean by that, if you surpass, let's say, the marathon distance and you physically break down, I just think you'll probably stop running. So I think that what that actual advice generally negates is that the vast majority of, and again, the vast majority of runners that I speak to mechanically are pretty good. They run 50 miles and they don't really have searing pains or this or that, because I think that there's a bit of self-selection happens at certain levels. Like if you've got problems with your cartilage and meniscus, and being a footballer, because of all of the sharp pivots and turns, probably means that you're unlikely to pursue it, because there's so much ultimately pre and post support that's needed. So when I remember, it's always interesting when I've spoken to on a trail some runners that I meet, everyone's like, oh, my feet are pretty good. I don't, I get a knee problem here or there, but I'm all right. And that's generally, like, I think the journey of certainly for myself, the amateur. So I do neglect it, but the reason that I neglect it is because I don't get pain like all of us. If I got pain, I absolutely wouldn't neglect it. I'd either stop running or I'd take care of it. There would be the only option. So I just tend to think that actually that's why people neglect it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose it's whether it's I don't know if like a double-edged coin's the right thing, but you sort of it's one of those things that you probably should be doing because it will prevent you from having those injuries down the line. But until you have those injuries, you don't worry about preventing it.
this is human nature, I think. So I think that it just negates that whole thing. It's like everyone will not study for the test, but get an A and keep following that same methodology until the day they get a D. Because why would you? You'd be like, well, I got an A in my last 6 test, mate. I didn't study. Why am I going to study now? You'd be like, you should study because you could get a higher A. And then you look at the return on investment and you think, wow, that much study for this much of a return. Like we're very efficient as people, and that's why I think that a lot of people just don't do it. Like my coach says, "Oh, do it." But I said, "Oh, I'll do it when I get a serious knee injury." And I was like, "But that day hasn't come." So yeah.
Well, fingers crossed it won't. It won't soon. How did that big jump go and doing the Chicago Marathon? Presumably okay because you're still here and still running.
Yeah, no, you know what, mate? I think that that run was my first ever marathon, and I did like 4. I'm not a quick runner, absolutely. I've never done a sub 3 hour marathon. I don't even think I've done a sub 3.5 marathon. The only time that I've taken running seriously as is this year, because it's the first ever year that I've had a running coach, and I think that's just and historic. Previous to that, I've not followed a program. And I've not even, and I see the difference because I've seen how much progress I've made this year. That's why I understood that there was such a difference, because there was someone to track and to watch and to adjust my plans dynamically and then to give me advice. So I think that if I look back, I'm 38. I did my first marathon, let's say, when I was 23. If I look back at the last 15 years, definitely the first 5 to 10 years. I mean, joy is at the foundation. I just love running. Of the other things that you mentioned, I applied to 2-1 SAS. I went out and trained with a private paramilitary program in Georgia because I had a mate who is Georgian. Then we went to uni together, and he's like, and they've got a very active military because they've only got a population of 3 million and they're always at bloody war. So he's like, I've got a couple of mates at XSF. And I was like, cool. Can I just bung a bloke like $1,000? He's like, it's a lot of money in Georgia. Probably yes. And so and the Muay Thai and Iron Man. So I've tried a lot of things, but I look back at it and I've always loved running. I've always loved running, and it's always been a good thing for a balance for mental health. I think the mental health aspect, I went to see, so what also changed with my running was when I was in my mid-20s and I had a lot of, let's say, personal problems, self-esteem, self-anxiety, and I didn't do very well in relationships. And it was really interesting because I went to see a cognitive behavioral therapist, and I spoke about how at that time, like, running was like quite medicinal / meditative, let's say. And she said, oh, well, if that works for you, do more of that. And then that began the transition of me doing a lot more marathons, and then saying, oh, cool, I'd love to do an ultra. And I did one in the Brecon Beacons, and I did like the Madeira Island Ultra Trail, I think it was. That almost broke me as well, because I forgot my lesson of not understanding that, dude, if you want to run that one's like 7,200 meters or something, over 115 kilometers. And then sometimes I do stupid stuff, and it's like, dude, do you understand like how much climbing that is? Like you're not really running, like things that are obvious but of course that's also that balance between diving into the deep end and being a little bit unprepared. But much like the whole A scenario, it's like, well, you know what? I've done all these marathons and ultras and I was all right, and I didn't prepare that much. I'm sure I'll be all right in this one. And that's, every runner's got that story of not every, but a bunch of them where they maybe DNF because I didn't really train properly, but I should be all right. Maybe I can do it. And then you discover you're like, that was really bloody hard. I couldn't do it at all.
Well, I think it's also, isn't it? Like you're trying to do hard stuff and you're achieving hard stuff. But when we're trying to do hard stuff in life, we are going to fail sometimes because it's hard.
It's hard.
That's
true.
It shouldn't be a surprise when you get out there and actually this is bloody hard. Maybe I'm not quite going to be able to do it this time, but we'll have another go down the line.
Touche. I love that, actually. It's a good reminder to myself, actually, when people are like, what do you mean you didn't finish? I should say that, well, yeah, it's hard. You don't always finish because it's really bloody hard. So yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for that.
No. Well, that's actually kind of what you were saying about moving onto ultras because help with mindset.
Yes.
And actually that little bit about doing harder things all the time. probably two parts of an answer to a question I was about to ask anyway, but I'm gonna go ahead anyway, because I was just wondering what made you, because you could have just carried on doing 5Ks, you could have knocked out half marathons, that might have helped with mental health as well, it would have scratched your running itch to a degree, but there was some reason why you decided, no, I'm going to go on and keep running further and further.
I think that it's a really good question, and I think that intrinsically I think ambition, in a word, and it's echoed across what I do with work also. Like, what is possible, how much can I do, and I say intrinsic because one wonders where drive comes from, and it's very difficult to articulate. I think that there's a couple of strands. I think there's that whole concept of the diaspora, so ethnic minorities that move from a developing economy to a developed economy, and that needing to work hard as a means to progress. That, I think, definitely I've seen that in terms of like the hard work that exists within my parents to raise us and the challenges they face. But again, but logically one would say, well, okay, cool, great. Are your siblings all doing stuff of a similar stuff? And they're not. My sister's in a normal job as a teacher part-time, and so it can't just be that. And so I think that drive and the desire to want to push the bar, I think I do think to a part it's something that comes within, but then also combined with like kind of scarcity of resources. Scarcity of resources, I think, is a big driver. But obviously with running is a luxury, let's be honest. I mean, running an ultra isn't something that people do because of scarcity. So it doesn't really, so that's where I struggle when I reflect upon it to answer that question. But I think for those people that have drive, it's got to be, there's got to be something internally that drives one to run 100 miles or more, because there's absolutely no logical reason to do it. It's like, you don't.
What do you mean by, I just want to explore a little bit more what you mean by that scarcity of resources. Do you mean within your life growing up, or more generally?
So I think that scarcity, scarcity of resources is a good psychological hack that I use that drives me in particular ways. So where does it stem from? Growing up in a working class family, where I would, when I was 15, say, Mum, I want to go to the cinema. And she said, well, use your pocket money. And I'd say, you give me £5 a week, cinema, £6.50. She said, we'll go once every 2 weeks. And I was like, well, that's like, what about that sucks. So, I got my first job as a paper round when I was 12. I got paid and then, so that was very normal in our household. It's like, well, you have to, if you want to do stuff, you have to put, we don't have money. So, we got all the full government grants and stuff as kids. So scarcity of resources from that extent was something that was kind of ingrained in our DNA. And I say DNA, but ingrained culturally as part of how we grew up. Now, obviously one would then consider how that doesn't clearly directly apply to running, but I think there's a lesson there that's quite useful. And for me, what that lesson has been is I've transitioned to a place where I don't have scarcity of resources anymore. I live in the countryside in Italy. I'm comfortable. I would need to work, but I wouldn't need to work for the next 10, 15 years. And I could easily just live. But there's, what Deeps, why do I wake up at 4:30 in the morning? Why are you running 100? Why are you training for 200-mile run? You don't need to do any of that. So I think that the echoes of that is something that's very powerful, that creates that fight or flight response. And I find that to be very kind of powerful. And I think it's kind of, a feeling and stuff. And then practically the things that I'll do, so that's where all of the systems apply. So then you have your running coach. Then I thought, well, if I come on to, this is maybe my third ever running podcast, but the whole principle behind it was to really get myself into so I'm quite a big believer also in like manifestation, as in if you speak about things, there's a really good book called Psycho-Cybernetics, where it's the precursor to basically CBT, NLP, and now maybe the more fluffier self-development that people talk about. But if you look at the history, it's very simple concept. It's like your brain's a prediction machine. If I say to you, Craig, how are you going to run from Bournemouth to Dartmoor? Your brain can't help begin to think about, well, you know what? I'll probably look it up on Google Maps first of all. Then I'm going to have a look at the route. Then I'm going to consider the elevator. So when you start saying, I'm going to run 200 miles, I thought, you know what? One way that's going to get me to run it is if I start telling people about it. So I've really gone off track now, but scarcity is big. Carrying that forward and then speaking about your goals helps then reinforce some of the drive, because also scarcity relates to integrity. Because I think if you, especially being a Brit, and this is where it works really well, I think, being British, because I think that we're a big, like Ricky Gervais, we're great narcissists, we're great cynics. So if you say something, you bloody better hell do it, because otherwise you go down the pub and your friends will just rip you to shreds. So I feel that, like, if you combine some of these elements, I find it to be really, really powerful as leverage, because I'm here now talking to you about running, and I'm like, 6 months ago, someone has said to me, "Oh, you do some running podcasts." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense." But I wanted to get down that road. So it began. I have a business coach as well, Valentina, and I was like, you know what? I want to run this 200 miles, and and then I thought about the different mechanisms. So then I said to my PR team, send some emails to running podcasts, because I'd like to talk about it. So I feel that you can create systems also, and it begins with just, I think, talking out loud about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, of having an attitude where you're looking to say yes to stuff, because you're kind of asking me that question about how do you run from, I can't remember the two places you said now.
Bournemouth to Dartmoor, yeah.
A lot of people, in fact, probably 99.9% of people would go, well, I won't. No, I'm not doing that. Your mindset is to kind of, if I'm right, is to sort of say yes, and to think, yes, I'll do that. And then, so rather than questioning the no part of it, you're instantly thinking about, well, how am I going to do it? Where's it from? How am I going to train for it, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. And I think that, yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, yes, it comes from that place. And again, it's like, it's because I've got so used to being around people that just say yes. And you realize what a silo you live in, because you realize, but the world's not like that, mate. You're like, really? Isn't it? My mates are. Like, don't you watch the news? No? Okay, well, that explains it. So yeah, I think that is truth. Someone will say, oh, what about this? What about that? And you're like, yeah, maybe. Yeah, why not? And as I get older, I have to become better, and I'm beginning to become better at understanding things that I should say no to. And as I think I told you with the run that I recently DNF'd, the one on Mount Adamello, which was mostly power hiking, and I stopped at 60 kilometers. It took me 15 hours to go 60. I mean, there's a whole series of bad preparation that's around it. But what was really powerful was to understand, okay, there's certain types of runs I really don't like. And I'm old enough now to not want to just go after the accolade singularly. So there's many runs that have serious elevation. We've got one just down the road, an hour from where I live, Tour de Gents, which some people call the world's, it's 24,000 meters of elevation gain. And I was like, right, that is getting written off completely, because that's just mostly walking. So I think that, for people that do have a habit of saying yes, one of the challenges is learning when to say no as well, because sometimes you find yourself thinking, why did I say yes to this? Like, who is it for? Who am I trying to prove what to? So that's also something that I still struggle with sometimes.
And it's interesting you're saying you're obviously doing these longer and longer distances, but you still kind of want to run them, because we talk about ultra running a lot, and a lot of it becomes, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, we've spoken about it loads on Running Tales for anyone who listens to all the episodes, but a lot of it will become hiking or walking and so on, but you still like to try and run even when you're doing these longer distances, if you can.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I like, and that's what I didn't appreciate until recently, that when people speak of ultra running, it's also to include the term hiking, really, when it comes to actually what you do. And
Mm.
call me silly. And this is the downside of my lack of prep, because I think my coach just assumed I understood that. And, I did the first 10 hours with running shoes and not trail shoes. And I was like slipping up and down. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And then my mate was like, why don't you? Because it was funny. It was like, oh, because I did the 100. So the 100 miler, the first 100 miler that I did this year was the Centurion 100. And I did the whole thing in just regular Asics, like road shoes. And it
That's
was all
the
right.
South Downs way, isn't it? Is that
Yeah,
right?
correct. I did the South Downs way, that one. So that was the one that I did. I did like 22 hours, 45 minutes. And I ran the whole way minus a couple of hills. And I felt all right. I was like, oh, I did a negative. I don't know if it was a negative split, but I was about 15 minutes either slower or faster. I don't remember, but it was pretty even the whole run. But because I did that in running shoes, I thought, oh, I'll be okay doing Adamella, which I was absolutely not. So it was like really bad, because I face planted once so hard, mate, that I had my my camel pack on, and the zipper was slightly loose. My power bank flew out for some reason, like 3 meters in front of me. And I was like, oh wow, I've never done that before. I've seen a big block just go whoosh. Yeah, I didn't appreciate that. And for those of you who are as unprepared as I am, that running with mad elevation, well, some elevation gain is runnable still, because it depends where you're doing it. But mountain running should not be called mountain running. They should be called ultra hikes instead of ultra marathons.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I did earlier this year with my wife Michelle. We did the Isle of Wight challenge.
Oh wow!
Which is so that is 106k. So and yeah, we pretty much walked the second half of it. And to be honest, actually, a lot of it was runnable because it was round the bay and stuff like that. But there were these odd hills which were just literally. There's no way you're running up and down them unless you're literally a mountain goat or Killian Jornet. It's just not going to happen. And actually, the other thing which people don't talk about all the times is how you're not able to run the downhills, because you're thinking, oh, I'm doing this uphill, I'm going to get to run down it in a bit, but it's like the side of a mountain and you're slipping on scree and stuff. It's like, I'm going to be crawling down that instead.
Craig, you're speaking my language, buddy, because that was the thing. People are like, oh, you got the downhills. I was like, dude, you ain't running these downhills unless you got a death wish. You are just kind of like, and then it was the first ever run that I never used. What are they called? The sticks. I don't even know what the name is for these sticks, because I did the first 100 miler. Because this year was the year that I thought, right, I want to do a 100 miler, and I'd not done a longer than a marathon. There you go, Jason Barmundi. Thank you. Trekking pole shows what I know, mate. So because I was like, oh,
ultras. He's a proper expert.
Yeah, no, amazing. So I just remember being 10 hours into Adamello, and I was thinking, oh my God, I have done 15 minutes of running in the last 10 hours. I want to shoot myself. And I remember doing my first like series of hills, and then the downhill was just impossible. So it was a big distinction for me and a big learning point, that I am happy to do elevation, but it can't be mountains. It needs to be stuff that I can run or walk the hill and then run down the hill, obviously, because then it's okay. So yeah, no, that was a big learning for me, buddy. It was not funny at the time, but funny looking back at it.
Yeah, I always say, like, this is what we do, isn't it? We learn from all of the runs that we do. I'm just thinking with kind of your idea of keeping on running, as it were. Do you do a lot of the shorter distances as well, half marathons, 10Ks, all that sort of stuff, or does that kind of not give you enough of a challenge?
So I don't do events anymore, because I was booked in to run, I think, the Palmer Marathon the other weekend, and then I just sacked it off because my coach has me running 4 to 6 hours every weekend anyway, and I thought, I've got to get in my car, I've got to drive several hours to this event to do something that I just step outside my door and I run anyway. So yes and no. Yes, in that I know that it's covered in my training runs, and no, in that so in my 20s, I think, and it relates, I think, to the parts of me that were more insecure, and I was much more concerned with stacking numbers of events completed and countries traveled. So one of the things that I did when I was 30 is that I want to do 30 marathons in 30 different cities in 30 different countries across the world. And I did it. And it was funny because my wife, we've been together 12 years, and she laughed. We laugh sometimes because she says, "You run more now than you did in your 20s when you were making a big fanfare about it. And now you just do it by yourself and you don't bloody even tell anybody about it."
Yeah.
And it's funny how things have transitioned. Maybe that's maturity. Maybe I'm not sure what that is, but yeah, no, I don't do any of the shorter distances at the moment. I've got this 200 miler in December, and then I think that next year I would like to actually try and do a short PB. So I'd love to see if I'm capable of, for example, doing a sub 3 hour marathon,
Yeah.
because I feel that there's the other side of it that, you know, everyone respects the sub 3 marathon guy. And my fastest time is like 3:38. It's terrible. So I was saying to my coach, like, do you think I can, like, he's like that's like 50 minutes fast. He's like, oh, well, he said, you're going to have to train specifically for that. You can't do it now because you just
No.
so yeah, that's kind of me. So I don't do any events other than this year. I've done 100K, the 100 mile, the other 100 mile that I DNF'd. So I finished the first two, and then I
Yeah.
got this 200 miler. Outside of that, all training, like no events.
So tell everyone about this 200 miler then. What's the big goal?
Yeah, sure. So the 200 mile is December the 11th. It's a Centurion 200 miles. It's maybe 6,000 meters of elevation gain, which actually isn't that much, guys, over 200 miles. Over 200, because you've got 100-mile events that are like double that, basically, which is what I attempted, like a buffoon, and then that got sacked off after 15 hours. I was like, oh, screw this, I'm done. So I guess the goal is, to be honest with you, mate, the goal is I did the 100 miler over the same terrain in 22 hours. So I'd be really happy. 22 plus 20, no, 23 plus 23, 46. Add another 10 hours. I'd love to finish it in less than 60 hours, but I have no conception of whether that's possible, because at this point, I'm just putting pie in the sky numbers. But I thought, well, I did 23 for the first one. So 23 plus 23 is 46. Give it another 10 hours, let's say, because I'm going to slow down. That sounds all right. So that would be a good outcome for me, mate.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely no expert on being able to help you with those numbers, but yeah, if anyone's listening who might have an idea of what sort of thing Deepak might be should be looking at, then send us a message and we'll have a chat about it and pass it on to him.
Yeah.
But are you kind of factoring into this? Presumably, I mean, if you did the other one in 20 odd hours, you obviously would have done, you know, you would have done a bit of running at night. So presumably your experience with that. But I'm guessing, looking at a 200, you may have to be factoring in possibly having a sleep at some point, dirt naps, all
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, so practically, yes. So I think that at the 24-hour mark, I'm planning to take a nap.
Yeah.
Between an hour to 90 minutes, depending upon what happens. Because the course is runnable, it means that it won't be a 200 miler with, 15,000 meters of elevation gain, which would extend the length of the race significantly. So thinking about that, I'm hoping that 90 minutes in total will be good. And it will be hopefully in two blocks, an hour and then 30 minutes somewhere else. So 24 hours would be the first kit that I plan to take, based upon how I felt when I did the first 24 hours. Like I needed to sleep by the time I was I was feeling tired after 20 hours, I think. So I think that's something that's important. And then I am curious to see, I've not run with that amount of the cold. I'm a bit nervous about, because it's in December and
Yeah.
so I'm wondering how cold it's going to be. And then of course, when you combine cold, dark, and then slowing down, you can get like really cold. And then I got quite lucky, I think, with the Centurion, the 100 miler that I did do. I basically ran with this, I forget his last name, Pete, lovely bloke, but basically he spoke for the whole 11 hours.
Yeah.
So I was entertained, mate. It was brilliant. There were moments where I was like, oh God, he could talk a little bit less. But I mean, generally speaking, 80% of the time, it was amazing. So then he dropped off like around Box Hill, I think it's called, like 50, 54 miles in or something like that. And then I got a bit worried because I thought I've got to run 11 hours by myself now. What if I have a mental breakdown? So that also worries me with this long event, which I don't know how I'm going to be if I'm by myself for significant periods. But yeah, generally speaking, they're the things that I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah. So Jason Bahamoni says, have as much fun as you can over every single one of those hours. I think that's, I mean, I'm the 100K, but I think that's really good advice, and keep enjoying it. And I'm always fascinated by people who run these races on their own, because the 100K I did, we were in a group, we kept each other going, we chatted a lot of the way, we actually had some really nice silences where, those silences when you're with somebody and you're being silent together. It's actually quite nice. It's different from when you're like on your own in the dark and your brain is talking to you. I'm always impressed with people who kind of do those things on their own, but hopefully you can grab hold of somebody again on the way around and just
Mate,
chat.
I'm gonna be like, Deepak, will anybody be my friend, Deepak? Because I'm gonna like look at people and I'm just gonna be that annoying like tagger honor, I think. So, but we'll see. Of course, there's no doubt I'm gonna do at least 10 to 20 hours by myself, because it's not conceivable that I'll run for the whole time with someone.
Sure.
So, but yeah, no. I guess I'm gonna find out. The longest I've gone by myself is around 12 hours, I think, in terms of running. And what's strange, I don't know if you've experienced this. I did my runs without any music, but when I train, I use music. But when I get to an event, somehow, although recently I've stopped using music when I run, so I'm still kind of experimenting with that, because I see that some guys run without music. And recently, my last 2 weeks of running, I left my headphones at home once, basically. And I felt like it was a big. I was like, I'm going to run without headphones, and I was quite nervous about it. I thought, oh God, what's going to happen? I was like, I'm going to. I had a weird fight or flight response, and then I was like, oh, it wasn't too bad. So I think that's something also I want to try and figure out. I just don't have enough experience, because I've not done like Orm, your guy who's done several 200. Like, he's probably done some crazy distances like successively. So I don't have a ton of experience with that whole thing. But I guess I'll let you know, obviously, after the event, exactly what happened.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, like I say, I've never done that kind of distance either. But from the people I've spoken, it's all very individual, isn't it? But from some of the people I've spoken to, they'll almost like they'll try and talk to other people. They'll want to be in their own head for a bit, but they might have music with them, so that in that moment when things are getting a little bit dark, they can just sort of get through the pain cave or whatever by listening to a little bit of music. Jason again says it's all about talking to others. He says no music, although I know that he has the Pet Shop Boys on repeat all the time. It's I think it was like one of songs on it.
He's laughing. Yeah, he's like, you caught me out, you sod.
But yeah, no, I mean, I used to listen to music quite a lot, but it tended to make me run faster than I should have been, and so I'd end up doing every run fast and get injured all the time. So I started to listen to big shout, everyone should do this. Listen to podcasts when you're running.
Nice.
So
I saw
a lot of podcasts.
When I did the Centurion, I ran past a bloke who was listening to, what is the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger's book? He released basically, anyway. It was funny. I three things that I thought were interesting. One guy was listening because I just read it recently. I was like, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger's podcast. And I was like, mate, is that Arnie Schwarzenegger? He's like, yeah. I was like, how are you finding it? He's like, I'm really enjoying it so far. And I was like, yeah, look out for this chapter. So that was one. Then I had another guy who I was told about on the trail. I was like, watch out for the guy who's chanting to himself. And I was like, what do you mean chanting? He's like, he's listening to prayer music and he's just praying to himself where he's chanting. So then I went past the guy, and then that was on the 100-miler, and then Indy 100K, which was a park run. So that was just like another thing, running around this park, 1 kilometer loop basically for like 12 hours, 10, whatever, 10, 11 hours. But there was a girl who had Bluetooth speakers around her neck that were like loud. So she was having her own concert, and it was like really, and she was having the time of her life, to the extent that there were people during the run that were getting pissed off with her because it was 10 hours in. There's people that are suffering, and she's there like, she had a T-shirt on. I think it said "Powered by Vegetables, Vegan Runner," and she was like, and it was a concert. So that was quite memorable as well. So to your point, it's always interesting to see everyone's got their own strategy. Clearly,
Yeah. Well, I'd have loved that. Assuming I like the music, but we had a couple of guys who had a stereo and the Isle of Wight, and yeah, I was sort of just
amazing.
behind them for a little bit because it's like, oh, this is getting me going. I quite like these tunes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone heard it because it was a 1 kilometer loop. It wasn't like you get for 70% of the loop you could hear her music. So it was like, if you don't like it, it's like a problem. But I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, this conversation, because I think I mentioned it in the intro, but one of the sister podcasts we have on this network is something called "What's in Your Earbuds," and this is literally what they talk about on that podcast, what they listen to, people's different strategies, and so on. And we actually you have to check it out. We have I think it's called the Everyday Athlete Podcast playlist.
Okay,
Which is all the
amazing.
tunes on that people listen to, and it's ridiculously varied. It's got everything from some quite heavy metal to cartoon tunes. I think
Wow,
DuckTales is on there to get you going in the middle of. That's what you need.
amazing.
When you're
Yeah.
150 miles on, there's nothing better than listening to DuckTales.
Oh, dude, that sounds
So,
amazing. I'm gonna
yeah,
have to give that a download actually,
yeah,
and
check it out.
just check it out.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. But also, I was going to say, if you've got any favorite songs or songs that really get you going when you're running, then yeah, we can add them to it. So let us know.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think what I mean, ironically, because I actively am trying to not listen to music right now. I don't know what I've got off the top of my head. I'll come back to you on that one though. But it's a good comment, and it's good to know. I'm going to try DuckTales certainly, and then check out that podcast. What's in your earbuds?
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's a good one to listen to. And how do you approach nutrition on your long runs, especially if you're
Yeah.
if you're running a lot of them? Do you revert to gels, or do you still just enjoy the aid stations when you get there?
So in training, of course, in training, I experiment. I'm trying to experiment with how far can I go on less nutrition. So I am trying that at the moment, just to experiment and explore. So typically speaking, I have a gel every hour, up until the point that I begin to lose track because tiredness seeps in, and then that would
Mm.
accelerate. But a gel every hour, and then I will also switch from nibbles, let's say, which might be peanuts and raisins or half a banana and oranges, so I call them like my nibbles. And then I'll change to, let's say, solids, where it'll be more food of substance, whatever they might serve: bread, pasta, soup, soup with pasta, like soup with bread,
Yeah,
or otherwise like potatoes and stuff. And I'll switch to that typically around 8 hours into a race during race day. And because during my training runs, because I don't do that many, I mean, relatively speaking, there's obviously runners that go and do races every weekend, and I don't do that many events, if you will.
mm.
So during my training, I don't have any solids really, other than I'll take a pack of like cashews, like a small pack, and that will be that plus gels would be good for me for 4.5 hours. And sometimes I'll go out without breakfast and I'll just do that and see. And so what actually struck me was when I did the Zurich Marathon once, and I remember waiting, and there's one of the pro guy. It was one of the kind of, and I just always remember him saying, when I was there, and he was talking about his race strategy, and I said, "Oh, so did you stop at the race stations?" He was like, "No, I don't stop at any of them." And I said, "Oh, well, don't you get hungry?" And he said, "No." He said, "Most people eat too much food at these events," and he says you can do so much more with much less. And then I began to look into, not, I mean, I say I look into, I stumbled upon a random excerpt from a Killian Jornet documentary, and he spoke about how, like, his nutrition during some of his sky running, and I was just shocked by how little he eats and how far he can go with that. And I've seen that in CrossFit as well.
Yeah,
So
but it doesn't take him very long to finish, though.
yeah, no, I know.
Keep going a
It's
lot
like,
longer.
that's because you're done and round before I got through the first fucking 10 miles, mate, and you've
Yeah,
already done like
exactly.
80. Yeah.
I don't eat
So,
on a 5K.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, generally speaking, that's my nutrition. But I
Mm.
am trying to see if eating less actually kind of helps me, and certainly as of the last couple of weeks, I've noticeably been eating less and my performance is improving, to be honest with you. So I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's kind of, it's not very scientific, but hey, it took me 10 years to get a coach, so maybe it'll take me another 10 years to sort my nutrition out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is. It's such an individual thing, and different things work for different people. I mean, I've spoken to runners who will basically run fasted before as well, and I don't know how they do that at all.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm talking ultras too. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, but everyone has their own thing. I just want to rewind again a little bit because we've got about 10 minutes left. From that stage where you were in your mid-20s, maybe struggling with one or two things, and you started to run more after having some of your CBT. How much do you put down to the success you've had since? I mean, you've got a very successful business behind you now. You've done all of these things and all this running. How much do you put down of that success do you put down to running and making that decision to run more?
That's I think I would put it at around 40% contribution. It's very integrated.
Yeah.
Specifically because it helped with my anxious energy. So energy that would then manifest in negative ways. So that might be relentlessly messaging she was my girlfriend, she's my wife now. At that time, we went for a couple of breakups, but I think I was too full on in the relationship, and it would then manifest in like a lot of arguments with my family, blowing up over stuff that I'm not proud to have blown up about. And there was a pattern of, let's call it, destruction. So I think it kind of, like tired me out, practically speaking, which was useful, like mentally as well as physically. And only running to the point of exhaustion will tire you mentally as well as physically. You're not going to do a casual 10K run and feel that. Obviously, it's relative depending on one's individual fitness and maybe if you're best efforting it. So that was helpful. Just and then also, I think that I feel like when you run ultras, it's helped me a lot in life because I just feel like I have a second energy system. Like I have an energy system that I can pull from with work that gives me in my work environment an unfair advantage. I'm used to working hard, and running is such a huge part of it. And it's always, a combination of things. When you know that you've done long ultras, it makes the work that you do easier. And it's not really intraday. It's about, like, it's not in the, it's across the course of time. So if I log my work hours like you log your run hours over 6 months, I will probably outwork a lot of people in terms of productive work. So getting things done. So yeah, I think running's been a significant part of it. It's calmed me mentally. It's helped with my anxiety. It's given me a good kind of. There's much more destructive pastimes. Let's say that. It could be at the pub 4 nights a week. It could be 40 cigarettes a day. It could be, and I think that sometimes, runners that run the distances that we run clearly are obsessive to a certain degree, because it requires obsession to want to do it to that degree. There's other, and if not that, then it probably wouldn't be something as healthy sometimes, I think. So I think that running's given me a lot, and outside of just the joy that it gives me, especially after running. When you've done, like today, I screenshotted my hour because it's like, it's my record elevation for an hour, where it's like 444 meters. I remember screenshotting my VO2 and then sending it to my coach and then underlining and being like, that kind of pride that it gives. I never got that from weight training. I never got that from when I did Thai kickboxing. I don't know why, but there's something about running and the exhaustion that really satisfies me kind of quite deeply inside. So yeah, man, running's done a lot for me.
And just one other question that sort of pops into my mind. I mean, we've spoken about your Indian background. There's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not tons of Indian or Asian role models,
Runners.
if you like, in the
Yeah,
world of running. Did
running.
you ever find that a bit strange when you were starting to do it? Did you ever did it ever put you off? Did you ever kind of feel that running
Yeah.
was not the tribe that you were supposed to be in because of that?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. And I think that I I mean, practically speaking, to be honest with you, Craig, I grew up around the school that I went to, Evelyn's, was 95% white. And
Right.
then I went to university, and the majority of my network was, interestingly enough, it was black for a fair while. So
Right.
I've not had any, I've not had many Indian influences around me. So to be honest with you, it wasn't something that I really even noticed. Um, and I think that it's not a surprise to me that within the world of running, there aren't many ethnic minorities at all. I mean, I do think ultra running, to a large degree, is a middle class to upper class sport. If you're working class, I think ultra running isn't something that makes any sense at all. It's like, oh, focus on your accounting career, or focus on your exams, or focus on something that doesn't take 12 hours a week of run time outside of recovery and prep and all of that stuff. And
Mm.
just thinking about it, all the time spent thinking about, oh, God, dude, like this weekend it's Diwali, we're having our Diwali celebration, and me and my wife are flying to the UK, and then on Sunday, once she jets off back to Italy, she's going to leave at 3 p.m. I've got to do a 6-hour run. So I was like, I'm thinking, I really don't want to do that. And he's like, you got to match your course profile. So I've got to go to London. I've got to go and find a bunch of So I think that I'm not surprised. It doesn't put me off that there isn't any Indian role models in running, because I think about it logically, and I think, you know what, like why, it's a middle class sport, and unless it's like second generation Indians, then and for the most part, people that of my skin tone, frankly, if you just look at Indians in the UK, most of them are just thinking about business and stuff. So I think that it doesn't surprise me. But it's always nice, though, when I am on runs and I do see the odd Indian fella or the odd like black guy, and then you
Yeah.
give each other like we all do. A bald guy sees a bald guy, he gives him a nod. A guy who's ginger sees, from I assume, I don't know, I don't want to insult anyone, but you give him a nod. So it is nice when I see that. But no, I've never really looked at anyone from a role model perspective. But I am following running a bit more now, and I look at Tom Evans and Jim. I'm just following a lot more of these documentaries and stuff. So that's cool. But it would obviously be very cool to see like an Indian guy who's doing like really well. But maybe it's your man Om. He's already done a couple of 200 milers. I'm like, bloody hell.
Yeah.
I can learn from him. So there's that.
Oh yeah, well he's 100% a serious runner. And just finally to finish off, we've got literally a couple of minutes left, but you've obviously done an awful lot, and almost like what's next seems to be too small a question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah. Look, I think that from a running perspective, like mechanically, I would like to complete this 200 miler. I would like to then do a marathon PB. And then at some point, I would like to do a event such as Moab, because I just want to see, what's kind of possible. So different types of runs. I've never done multi-stage events, multi-day events, like the one in the desert. Well, what is it called? The famous Desab. Yeah. Like I just, that would be a cool experience. I
Yeah.
suspect that there's harder events when you do single stage, like long distance, but so stuff like that from a running perspective, just to experiment and explore what's possible. And then, but I think I will say and be honest that I'm 38, and me and my wife are looking at beginning to finally have a family. So I think that I do see a couple of years potentially where I wouldn't run further than a marathon while we focus on having a family and raising kids and stuff. So I was thinking about it. I was like, right, I've got maybe a year or two before it's going to be a bit more challenging to be like, oh, I'm going to go and do a 6-hour run. She'll be like, no, you bloody ain't. So Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of runs. But I really would like to crack a sub 3 hour marathon, because that's something like I've done 35 marathons, but I've never done a sub 3 hour marathon. So, I want to, I respect much more a bloke who says, I've only done one marathon. You'd be like, what'd you do? I said, I did 2 hours, 45 minutes. And we're like, whoa, that just discounts all of my marathons, you bastard. So that would be nice. Yeah, that would be a good goal for me for next year.
Oh, well, good luck with it all.
Thank you, mate.
I think from your record, I'm sure you'll smash it all. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast. And thank you for everybody out there who's come along and listened.
No, amazing. Well, thank you, Craig. I really enjoyed the chat, and thank you to all of the people that are listening in, and a special thank you to Jason, your man in the comments. Really appreciate that, buddy. So yeah, no, thank you, really appreciate it.